But in 1960, Norman decided to step aside and let the next Chandler heir step in, and this is his son Otis.
From Mayberry.
Town drunk. Otis was groomed from an early age to take control of the family's newspaper. He worked as a printer's apprentice, he worked as a reporter, and in advertising and circulation departments. He'd be taken over as president and publisher at the age of 33. Otis would be taking over all the LA Times stuff. Norman would concentrate on expansion and diversification, buying the Daily Newsday in Garden City. See, this is where I'm reading the sentence, and I read that Norman did it, but now that I'm reading that, I'm pretty sure this is Otis. All the readings, they don't know who they're talking about, and I don't know who they're talking about, and I don't know if they're talking about Harry Chandler or Harry Chandler. Anyways, Otis is not like the men who came before him. Stop what you're doing right now. If you're listening to this podcast, stop, pull over.
Drop the baby.
Look up a photo of Otis Chandler. Do you know what he looks like?
No.
Do you want to see a picture?
Should I drop everything?
You should probably drop everything. Just so when we continue, you know what I'm talking about.
Let's see.
I shouldn't start this segment.
How do you spell Otis?
This segment of what I'm doing shouldn't start by acknowledging his looks.
You mean Newt Rockney All-American?
Describe him.
He looks what you imagine an astronaut looked like in the 50s.
Like an astronaut who works out, we need a model. We need a
he played
face
football in high school. That's weird.
He's a surfer and a car fanatic. He looks like if Rob Liefeld drew a surfer. He looks like action figures I had as a kid.
It's the old style of surfer where they're really
buff and they have
all-American.
Muscle Beach was at the beach and you're like, I'm also going to surf now on a surfboard. Big chest, muscular blonde crew cut, but overall not like the guys before him. He looks like he has fun. He works out. You know what I mean? With his blonde hair, weightlifter physique, and love of surfing and hot cars, Chandler was a quintessential Californian of his generation.
They finally bred an all Los Angeles
pure California.
Boy. Yeah.
Eugenics works. He was an avid hunter as well as a collector of muscle cars and motorcycles. He was best known for his athletic diversions, including his once national ranking as a shot putter. He did not do much to dispel his image when he reportedly fled an editorial meeting after being handed an urgent message, "Surf's up at 12:30.
Really?
He's a parody.
That's funny.
He's a parody Californian, and I like him so much.
We're having a weenie roast. Come on down.
Sublime's playing.
Meet me at Dockweiler.
Anyways, Otis is not like his father or his grandfather or his great-grandfather. Why?
This ain't your grandfather's
Harrison Gray. This isn't your grandfather's
Chandler.
grandson.
Yeah. Oh, wait, it is.
What makes him different? Because he cared about journalism. The paper had a long history of being ultra-conservative, as we know. Even with moderate Norman leading the way, he still was
That's so weird that they went the full spectrum through the generations.
And for a long time, the LA Times was considered a mouthpiece for conservative political causes. As far away as London, The Economist magazine regarded the Times as a shoddy sheet of extreme right-wing viewpoint. And right-wing viewpoint. Oh, come on, they're both right. Just like the Chandler clan, its politics were squarely with the reactionary arm of the political party. Anti-union, anti-communist, it buried all the Democratic candidates. It was a laughingstock. It was basically Fox News of its day. And all Otis wanted to do, he didn't even want to make it liberal. He just wanted to make it fair. So he just wanted to balance the scales. If you're going to publish all this stuff about conservative stuff, we're also going to publish the other side. So it's a wide range of journalism.
Double
fair.
The coverage right there. You can double the size of the issue.
That's 16 pages out of 8, brother. Who's going to pay for that?
We want to promote Mormon bishop pills. We got to also promote Mormon shrinkage pills.
Catholic shrinking pills, which is just how are you going to give birth to more babies? I'm Catholic.
His words, not mine. Yeah. I can't say that, but I think it.
I think it every time I look at a little family. I'm like, you stop. You go to
you Catholics. You don't believe in eugenics.
So Norman retires in 1960, and then comes, like I said, Otis. I'm sure his grandfather Harry would be rolling in his grave, but there wasn't enough room in the sarcophagus to move around, so he just had to sit there and take it. I don't like old rich people. Norman achieved this change in the paper's direction with the help of editor Nick Williams, who was hired in 1958. This was accomplished by upgrading and enlarging its staff, and they were all really good writers. They opened new LA Times bureaus elsewhere in the United States and abroad, and they've developed thorough coverage of important events. Under his watch, the LA Times would become a nationally recognized and distinguished publication. The Times won 7 Pulitzer Prizes during Chandler's tenure.
We saw them on the tour.
Yeah, we saw them, yeah.
Since they were trying to move everything, we all got to take one. So
I got to scroll my name on one of them.
I got one for cooking.
In a controversial move, he agreed to publish a long series about the John Birch Society, which was an ultra-conservative organization which recruited for its base in Pasadena and San Marino. The Birchers, they sent a letter to the Times demanding the impeachment of Chief Justice Earl Warren as a part of a letter-writing campaign, and they were becoming, as the letters moved further along on the deadline, they became more abusive and demanding and irate until an editor took the letters to the legal department and started looking into the organization. Otis ordered a strong front-page editorial condemning the group's ultra-conservative, sometimes virulent political views. More than 15,000 subscribers canceled their subscriptions, but the paper made clear its new direction and in time gained hundreds of thousands of readers. And doing this, he severed ties with so many family members, although I couldn't find out which ones were which.
I can name one.
Let me think. Maybe all of them, except for Buff. He truly remakes the LA Times, and he hires some of the best staff that the paper has ever had, and they were writing unbiased, fair journalism. He really fostered the idea of Los Angeles as a world-class city. Again, like the Times becomes his microphone. Like you were saying, every week you're getting Otis Chandler delivered to your front porch, and it's like full journalism, which is really great. The Times was a titan of metropolitan.
Was it changing?
Under his guidance, the LA Times was second only to the New York Times. He formed a news syndicate with the Washington Post. He expanded foreign bureaus of the paper. He was really good because he featured important stories of civil rights movements. They covered Watts' rights really fairly. The paper was powerful under his direction. In 1970, the weekday circulation tops 1 million subscribers. But in 1980, Otis surprised everyone at the annual Times editorial award dinner when he announced his resignation as president and publisher.
Just like Bilbo Baggins announcing he...
Here's a huge surprise to everybody. I still have the ring. And they're all like, what's the ring?
Here's a big surprise to all of you. I'm invisible now. Bye.
Do I have to hear about it over the next 14 hours?
You're mean to Lord of the Rings and zoos, okay?
That is the longest... It's the sound of walking with their giant feet. Their giant, ugly feet that I made to look at, and these two want to eat all the time. Where do you even come from? Ephraim, or wherever the elves are from. Where are the elves from?
Lothlorien, okay.
Yeah,
Riverdale?
Riverdale. They're from Riverdale. Don't you remember? Jughead puts on the one crown.
I feel like we've made this.
We have. This is an allusion to a previous episode where we made a
Jughead,
joke.
no.
Jughead, no.
I'm going to eat so many hamburgers. Sauron. You are my evil king. Bad musical. Keep going.
I can't believe... Oh, okay. So he resigns as president, but he kind of sticks around a little bit as chairman and editor-in-chief until about 1985. So he sticks around, but he's not in charge. His longtime editor, Tom Johnson, becomes the fifth publisher of Los Angeles Times after he leaves. The 80s were a strong decade for the Times, but by the end of the 80s, they saw, at the beginning, they saw the departure of Otis. Tom Johnson left, and as well as that, oddly, the Herald Examiner around this time closed their doors. It was a scary sign of the Times. After them comes David Laventhal, who oversees the company in the 90s and recognizes a small swell in attention before the internet pretty much kills everything. Meanwhile, the Chandlers upstairs are trying to regain power once again and restore their conservative lean, which reflects in the paper's editorials becoming bland and one-sided again.
Wait, who?
I don't know which Chandlers.
The lesser Chandlers.
The lesser Chandlers. Like I only really covered the ones that are in charge.
The West Side Bagginses, if you will.
So there are other Chandlers. Like every generation Chandlers, there's at least like 4 or 5, and they're all named similarly. So I don't know who they're talking about. In 1991, the Times Mirror folded after 2 years of declining earnings. Leventhal then starts cutting costs. One of the first ones was that writers and staff stopped getting first-class air travel paid for, and they were incredibly upset about this. Advertising was slipping away, and not just from the LA Times, but all print publications. This was the time when...
How am I going to get my Bishop pills?
What, do I have to go on the internet now? What is it called? How do I even being that? The LA Times was 7th out of 11 SoCal market areas for advertising. But what was successful was independent LA Times publications like San Fernando Valley and Orange County, which were later dropped. What was changing was the city, the Southland. Middle-class Southern Californians were not getting their information from reading the paper anymore. It was becoming a dead market. This was that era when newspapers started to die out and stuff, and then it leads into the 2000s when they were just shutting down.
And limiting our article readage.
While serving on the Times and Mirror board until 1998, Chandler approved of the hiring of Mark Willis, a serial company executive with no newspaper experience, to start running Times Mirror when the company was mired in sagging profits in 1995. Wiles is not good. He started to shed a lot of things that worked for Otis Chandler, like New York Newsday, which was an Otis Chandler thing. He also destroyed a long divide between the business side and the editorial side of the LA Times. They were separated long when Otis was in charge because they didn't want advertising influencing reporting. Business sells the ads, editorials tell stories, and they can't mingle. At this era, the mood of the company...
So it's like promoted content or
pretty
whatever.
much. We'll get to that. The mood overall, the company was uncertainty and skepticism. It seems like nobody trusted any new management, and the Chandlers seemed oblivious to the changes that were happening. By 1998, there were no Chandlers on the staff of the LA Times anymore. It had been 81 years since that was a thing. 81 years in the making, and now there are no more Chandlers working at the LA Times. In 1999, Willis and the Times got in hot water when it was learned that there was a secret deal, and the deal was that they devoted an edition of the newspaper's Sunday magazine to the new Staples Center in exchange for a hefty $2 million in ad revenue, which is why Otis kept the business and editorial side separated. So they would do all these stories on the Staples Center, and in return, they would get profits from the Staples Center, which is why he built a divide between the two. This deal led to unrest in the newsroom, and the paper later issued a front page apology, but the scandal stained. It was so bad that Otis Chandler came out of retirement to scold them in the year 2000. Chandler
took off his wetsuit.
I had to come back from surfing killer waves for this to tell you how to do your job. Chandler dictated a statement that was read aloud in the newsroom. I have reluctantly decided that I can no longer sit idly by and watch a very serious decline in the morale of people throughout the times. They are changing. And then he pulled out an acoustic guitar and he played it perfectly, and people were like, he's really good.
He can do everything.
Chandler railed against this unbelievably stupid and unprofessional handling of the Staples specials section. He also criticized the management for staff cuts and reduction to the size of the paper, which he said threatened its credibility. Basically, after this point, he welcomed the sale of the Times, and it came quickly. Chandler Family Trust sold the newspaper's parent company, the Times Mirror Co., to the Tribune Co., publisher of the Chicago Tribune.